Welcome to the FNDN Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. All right, Shirley, welcome to the pod. I'm so excited to have you here. Now, I'm going to do a quick little introduction for you, for those who aren't familiar with you, and then we're going to dive into today's topic. But for those joining us, Shirley, you've had a pretty impressive background. So probably one of the more prominent examples, I'm sure the one that gets trotted out all the time in podcasts for things like this, was, of course, your experience at Monday. So you were the first product manager at Monday.com, which is an incredible tool, incredible platform. And you saw what is just one of the most, amazing growth stories in terms of tech companies. So if I understand it right, you joined your employee number 30, grew to over 2,000 people. We saw revenue go from 6 million to over $1 billion. And then you took things just a little bit further from being product manager into actually leading their core work management product, which had a huge, annual recurring revenue of $850 million, which is a crazy career trajectory. One of the things I loved when I was kind of preparing for this and just making sure I understood the interface of this with the people stack and the people culture was this quote that really stood out to me, which is that you said what made Monday.com really successful wasn't necessarily the tech, but the people and the culture, which I think is great. And just like it forms a perfect segue to my next question, or to my first question really, which is like, tell us a bit about what you're up to now. Where are you focused? What are you doing?
First of all, hi, it's great to be here. So after my crazy journey at Monday.com, I partnered with Arnon, and we opened the Dream Team, which we call it AI native people operating system, basically a people management platform, but kind of in a different approach. So everything, we focus a lot on zero admin work for HR managers to focus on the more strategic stuff, lots of cool things with AI, proactive insights, fully customizable. So taking a lot of our experience in Monday.com, I guess, and seeing this stress test of hyper growth and how to help other companies be extremely successful and scale in the best possible way.
I love it. Gosh, that future vision of like no admin is absolutely one that I know I've lived, and I certainly, am dreaming for. And I think it is the dream. Absolutely. I think it's the dream of myself and probably anyone listening to this episode today, not to mention HR people around the world. I think that sort of, again, pivot nicely into, what this episode and certainly our second episode are going to be about, which is all about, product-led thinking, product-led principles, and the place that they have, the role they can play within the people team. And I very much see, the ability to reduce and remove admin to be a core element of how teams can actually see a transition into this kind of a future kind of operating model. But I really want to spend this episode talking about what it is, helping people understand. I'm sure they've heard, countless podcasts or posts or articles or something about this concept of like product-led thinking. If you follow like, incredible people like Jessica Swan or Luke Omani, there's a lot of great thought leaders out there talking about this concept. Maybe let's back it up for those who are kind of, have heard it talked about, but maybe aren't super clear on it. How would you explain this to someone who's pretty new to the concept? What does it look like?
Yeah. I think about it this way. So the same way that product teams ship features, people teams ship processes. So performance reviews, onboarding, compensation, engagement surveys. Product teams have users, people team have too. So employees, manager, leadership, Product teams worry about losing users to competitors. People teams worry about losing talent to other companies. So a lot of similarities and kind of the parallel are striking. But still, in a lot of cases, product teams earn a lot of respect, and they expect it to be strategic, data driven, deeply user centric. And they earn trust because of that and autonomy, and they are seen often as critical to the business. And HR often, in a lot of cases, still treated as operational. And a product mindset changes that. It's how people team move from being the folks who run processes to being trusted partners shaping the company's direction. It's how they claim the same respect and the same room to operate like product people do, and really take their business forward.
Yeah, I love it. It's giving me flashbacks to a lot of roles that I've been in, especially early in my career, where I felt like a real, I guess, norm for the team that I was in was very much like caught in the admin, caught in the busy work, not necessarily feeling like we were delivering much of substance. There was a lot of like being pulled into meetings. There was a lot of, being expected to answer emails or questions, kind of quite ad hoc, basic stuff about policies, things like that. That used to really constitute a large part of my day. And so I think some of the things that really appeal to me about this kind of product-led approach and this concept for people teams was this real shift, as you said, towards being a really critical partner and delivering, outcomes of real substance and things like that. Talk about like, or I guess share a bit with me about like why you think that this approach is really important for people teams to start considering, start embracing in their operating models.
And we already touched it a little bit, but I think that sometimes HR still have this a little bit brand issue. Although despite progress we've made over, I don't know, the past decade, and that's wild to me because the actual work is nothing but up. We started with it. I truly believe that what made Monday so successful was the people, was the culture, and a company would truly live and die on the way it hires on board, pays, develop, exit even its people. And this gap is crazy. And, and you see this gap all the time, performance cycle that takes months and doesn't really land, and engagement surveys that end up in 50-page deck, but doesn't really drive outcome. And that's really a shame. And I think it's been like that for many years. But at this point, 2025, kind of, I believe, turning point for HR. Everything changes. Teams are remote. Teams are distributed. Gen Z is reshaping the workforce. AI completely changing the game. So, what used to kind of work, I think, will not anymore. So we need to do this shift in order to navigate a very complex reality. And and yeah, and despite this shift, I still see often a lot of people team, operate on this intuition or template that used to work but are not relevant anymore. And and a product mindset kind of changes that.
Yeah, I love it. And you've touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious to hear like what do you think if I'm a chief people officer, I'm a head of people, I'm kind of, I'm starting to build familiarity with this concept. What do you think are some of the symptoms I'd be looking for within my own team to go, okay, I think this is a concept that we really need to take quite seriously in terms of how it is that we start to evolve for the future. What are the things that you think, I should be looking for or considering as I go, actually, yeah, this is a potential solution to some of these challenges that I'm seeing.
I think that if you're seeing that you invest heavily in processes that end up and they don't make significant impact, or if you're seeing that you're pitching new initiatives and people like, you don't really get a buy-in and people kind of nod, but nothing actually changes in reality. Or you're seeing that your teams, that you need more and more and more people in your HR team to solve some issues, but that's not necessarily the solution. And I think it's something that you kind of feel that you're not sometimes not treated as an equal partner. You're not really there in the most critical decisions, as you should. I think that if you see these symptoms, so you might think about kind of a shift. And again, I don't think it's something that it's not like an on and off or something that you need to declare from now on. I'm doing a shift to product mindset. It's ongoing work. I think that, there's a lot of principles you can adopt and change in your day to day, and people will notice. And you will notice. I think that things will gradually change. So it's not about the grand unveiling about this new type.
Okay, so I'm hearing there's like, if you're feeling like maybe, and this gets talked a lot in a lot of the circles that I'm in, it's still a constant topic, is like this concept of having a seat at the table, right? Of being a trusted, credible commercial leader, being a partner to the executive team, having traction and real impact, and being able to draw a connection between the work that you're doing and the outcomes of the business and the goals they're trying to achieve. A lot of these things you think, these product-led approaches, well, those are symptoms rather for essentially a salve that the product-led approach can be. What about on the other side of things for the teams that you have worked with that have sort of successfully or even partially made the transition to this kind of an approach? How do you see this sort of showing up in their day to day, let alone being at the table and being a commercial leader and things like that?
So I can think about maybe we can start with an example.
Yeah, please.
Performance reviews. I think it's a very good example process that takes so much time and so much effort, not only from the HR team but also from employees and managers, and the impact can be really, really meaningful. So what we often see is a kind of a copy paste syndrome of performance review. I've seen it in other companies. We're doing the same reviews we did 2 years ago because that's what we're doing. It's that time of the year again, we need to do performance reviews. So if you switch your mindset to product mindset, I can give some examples. So to start with, you start with impact. You're not asking how are we running performance reviews. You're asking what is the impact we want to achieve. And what we did, we said, okay, we need this year, we have super challenging goals. We need to reach $15 million, I don't know, in ARR in the next 6 months. Okay. In order for that to happen, we need every person in the company to be the best version of themselves. They need to be hyper connected to the company goals and to the company culture. And that's what we are optimizing for. Okay, so we're not optimizing for, I don't know, what would be the best compensation approach, or who should we fire, or who should we promote, or things like that. And we're optimizing for that, and that already created some sort of shift. And then the next part was to validate it with data. That's what product teams do. They don't just have hunches. They go and research, they do user interviews, they look on data, they look on competitors. And so in this example, we talk to users. The users are employees and managers and leadership, and we try to kind of unlock what's blocking people from sounds a little bit cliche, but to reach their full potential, to be the best version that we need from them. And we gain lots of insights. Like, for example, we understood that people are afraid to make mistakes. And we understood that feedback isn't really landing. The feedback that managers are giving them is not so clear. And then, okay, it's another insight to shape the process. And then the next step wasn't to already start to design, the perfect performance review, but we started with a kickoff to leadership where we, summarized all the insights so far. So kind of framed what we're trying to achieve, what are the problems that we saw in the research, what is the plan, what is the timeline, what are the goals, and in this step, made sure that everyone are aligned, because often we start this initiative and we end up after 6 months understanding that no, the CEO didn't look on it that way, and it didn't meet their needs, and that's a shame. So, before starting the process, like, make sure everyone are aligned on the goals. Their feedback can be heard, and we can, bake in their feedback from the start. So a kickoff meeting, okay, already made some refinement to the process. The next step, instead of now investing 6 months in designing the perfect performance review, we said, okay, how can we ship MVP? Like, what's the first step we can do that answers the underlying need or the underlying impact? And then we said, okay, before doing this big performance cycle, let's do this routine in one team. We started only with the engineering team, um, on baking in one question in their one-on-ones. What's not working for you? What's not working? And sorry, two questions. What's working and what's not working today? So working on this ongoing feedback in the one-on-one, gain lots of insight, trust, and then afterwards launched it to other teams. And at that point, after we did that, it was a very, very lightweight version of performance reviews, just, making the ongoing processes. We stopped and we said, okay, now we can take it to a full-blown performance reviews, or we can focus on other stuff that's on our plate. Better onboarding, better hiring, better. And when we evaluated with the other initiatives, we understood that it's good enough for now. Okay, so it's good enough for now, and it made the impact that we wanted. And for this point of time, we can move on. Okay, and a year after it changes, it wasn't the process because the needs of the business were different. And but that's an example on how a process that used to be very heavy, very time consuming, not always very meaningful and impactful, changed to more, impact oriented, incremental release, get a really good buy-in also from leadership because we show them what we're going to do. Also for employees because we asked them before what's stopping them. It landed. And yeah, so that's just one example, but it can make a really massive impact on HR day to day.
I can imagine. And I think as you were sharing that example, some of the things again that, the flashbacks that I'm having in my mind of, my own experience. I mean, gosh, it took me a really long time in my own career to realize that this concept of best practice was a bit of a myth and that actually there's not this, one size fits all solution that
Yeah,
all HR teams can borrow from and apply or take with them from job to job, right? I would
exactly.
imagine,
What's that true now at this time for this company at this
yeah.
stage? Definitely.
Not to mention the buy-in has always been, it's been a perennial challenge for HR teams. Again, I think, run with this concept of best practice and thinking, hey, I've got a solution to what I think the problem is, and I'm going to implement it only to find that the uptake from the team or, from leaders or the users in this case is actually quite opposed to it because it's not seen as drawing a strong connection between the problem and the solution, and buy-in becomes a real challenge. But I also know that, in startups or in smaller organizations, often there's a lot of pressure to build quickly and to get things in place. And I often see this with a lot of companies and teams that I work with where they're just looking for a solution and might see some of this upfront investment around user interviews and MVPs and things like that as maybe a little bit nice to have rather than actually, couldn't you just solve the problem for us now and put in a comprehensive performance review system that does all, has all the bells and the whistles? What would you say to a team that's kind of facing that pressure? How do you get them to really emphasize the value to taking this approach and ensuring that the solution is actually fit for purpose?
I'll start with sharing An example from my early career, um, when I joined Monday.com as the first, that's from product, okay, and then we will talk about data. When I joined as the first product manager, it was the same kind of vibe. It was, I just want to launch features. Why I need, like, it's um, yeah, it's stopping us. Okay, why do I need to do research? Why do I need to do kickoffs like user interviews? It's taking too much time. But when you start to work like that, you understand it actually saves you a lot of time, because building features for 6 months that no one uses, and I did it, and nothing is worse than that. It takes much more time than investing the extra mile in validating your ideas. So the same goes for HR. And you talked about buying, so I, I I don't see so much resistance from leadership. The resistance I see to implementing this type of product-led approach is from within the HR teams, because then that's often what you said. Like, it's often I don't have the time. I'm already underwater. I'm drowning, and the same story that I talked to about product management is the same for HR management. I believe that it does take time. It's true. Like, doing a kickoff meeting, polishing kickoff slides, doing the research, thinking through even why am I doing it. It takes time. Uh, but the time you spend on working for on a compensation, a new method for 6 months, and no impact, that hurts much more. And very long engagement surveys that doesn't do anything, that wastes so much more time. So that's one thing. Okay, so if for down the line, it actually saves you tons of time. And also, I believe, do one thing less. Drop something, drop one ball. I truly believe that it's better to do one less initiative, but the one you do, do it, with impact in mind, with evidence in mind, do the right buying work
Yeah.
beforehand. And I think it's 10 times more impactful. Um,
Yeah, it'll come back to focus, doesn't it?
Another Yeah, and maybe just another side note. I often hear this also on the hat of, working on Dream Team. I think it's very valuable to zoom out and understand what am I wasting my time on. And lots of the time, it's about these repetitive, mundane admin work that you don't really need to spend all this time anymore, with the tools we have now in AI, and lots of the processes can be automated and then really can free up some time for the cool stuff.
Yeah, I think sometimes, and I know I've felt this as well. I think sometimes there's a safety in the mundane and in the admin sometimes, because it's something that we're comfortable with, it's something we're familiar with. But I think you're right. The imperative around what a business demands from its people team is so it's changing so much that I don't think we can afford that anymore. And I think we really have to be leaning into these kinds of
Yep.
approaches. Not to mention, admin reduction or elimination where possible through tools like a Dream Team, but finding ways to really be having these kind of value add impacts. Last couple of things that I'm keen to hit on. I heard you saying a little bit, a few things that earlier around, interviewing and just some of these approaches with respect to engaging with, various stakeholder groups, building MVPs. Something that came to mind for me is like for a team that's evaluating a shift like this, high level, what are some of the skills that they might need to consider before they start to jump into being, product led and adopting some of these principles, do you think?
There are some tools in the tool set of product managers. I don't think you need to acquire all of them beforehand, but it can also kind of work in progress. But yeah, like user interviews, it's not just talking to people. It's a systematic way to uncovering motivations and what's really going on. So user interviews is crucial. Um, Data analysis and data storytelling. I find that that's really, really crucial, and that's often what gets in the way of HR credibility. You know, you've seen these dynamics that HR is presenting data, that's the funnel of recruiting, and then someone says, no, that cannot be. We didn't have this and this people. That doesn't make sense. What's the sample size? So everything around data storytelling, how to really master this capability is super important. Um, Storytelling, generally speaking, how to do a kickoff, how to do a sync meeting, how to own the room when you present stuff. So how to control the dynamic and make sure conveying your message. I think that's something which is very, very critical. Um, I believe that's the basics. There are lots of other stuff, how to plan a project. So everything around project management, or how to ship incrementally. So not a big chunk, but how to divide it to small iterations. But you learn it on the go, and it's not so scary as it sounds. And
That's
I
it.
think the best thing is just to start.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think for those who are listening and going, okay, it sounds like there's a few things there for me to pick up. So I'm going to, because I'm a subscriber of your newsletter, and I know user interviews was actually a very recent addition. So I'm going to make sure to drop that in the show notes. I'm
Ah,
actually reading a book called The Mum Test as well. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one before. It's quite a short book. I actually saw Luca Mani mention it, and it's quite good as well. It's all about not asking questions that, your mum might say, oh yeah, it sounds like a great idea, congratulations. But it's not a great helpful user insight, because they're just trying to kind of stroke your ego a little bit. So it's all about how to ask
exactly.
more meaningful questions and avoid the ego element of it. But no, some great other skills there that I think people absolutely need to dive into. I guess last one closing out, and we touched a little bit on this already, but I'm curious to hear your take from a team who's kind of, listened to this so far and thought, okay, I think this is a transition we need to make. We're going to start looking to adopt some of these skills. But ultimately, it is something that's going to require buy-in from an exec or a founder or something like this. When we have such a strong brand that I think can be entrenched in things like The Office, or, some of these like horrible examples of what bad HR, transactional HR can look like.
That's the
How do you,
antidote of being
yeah,
perceived as coming from the office.
I know, right? I agree. But when it's so strongly, like I don't know how many places I've worked where I say, I've worked in HR, and people go, oh, you're hire and fire. Like, what's the really effective way to kind of break the hold of that brand, and just be, cut through it, be really clear to the exec team the kind of value add that this sort of change is going to have? Because I think in many respects it's going to have to buy the space, for example, to drop the one thing, or to help make the transition to, or get the investment to, to buy the book, to read how to do user interviews, or, understand some of the skills, things like that. What have you seen have been the sort of top one or two things that teams can use effectively to just go, hey, this is really important. It's going to drive real value for the business. Let's make this investment.
Yeah. Actually, from my experience, doing this conversation is not super helpful, because this concept might sound a little bit abstract. Um, and I think that once you start to do it, and really starting small, that already kind of do the work for you, because you don't need to put fancy name around it, like product led, I don't know. But the language that you will speak, the language of impact, of evidence, of iterations, of business outcomes, that's the language of leadership. So in practice, that's music to see sweet ears. That's the language they speak. That's the language they understand. So I don't find any resistance coming from there, but maybe not to make such a big deal
Yeah.
out of it.
Peace, song
Uh,
and dance.
drama out of
Okay.
it.
All right. All right. Well, look, I mean, this is actually kind of perfect. This has worked out to be a nice, beautiful little cliffhanger, because I know you and I are going to record another episode. We're going to dive into what it actually means to make this jump from transition or from the transition from theory to practice. So we won't spoil the surprise, but suffice to say, just get started and just start to, proof of concept is absolutely one of the ways to go. This has been super insightful. I think there's so much here for heads of people to sink their teeth into. Any final things you would cover before we wrap things up for this conversation?
Well, let's get our hands dirty and start to do product work as HR.
Love it. My favorite thing is don't ask for what is it? Beg for forgiveness, don't ask for permission. So I think that's a perfect way to summarize how it goes. Amazing. Well, look, thank you for joining me for this one, and I'll see you over in episode 2.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.